Hello, and welcome to the annual update of Your Financial Journey by the Advisory Group and WealthStep, an education session to help increase retirement readiness success. WealthStep is the division of the advisory group that provides guidance process to participants of 401k plan clients and their spouses, and our direct WealthStep program clients who are often 401k IRA rollovers that are not yet at the advisor group's minimum client size or who prefer a more digital experience. This video is intended for those groups as well as friends and adult children of clients who may benefit from concepts that promote smart saving and investor behavior choices. So what does the WealthStep program and advisory group do? At the highest level, we help people meet the 5 requirements of financial success with many endeavors, including financial independence and financial freedom success. It requires resources, knowledge, time, desire, and discipline. In many cases, some people have some combination of these 5 or may periodically have some combination, but most people do not consistently have all 5 at the same time, and that's why having outside guidance and help can be valuable in increasing the success of retirement readiness. More specifically, the way the WealthStep program works for 401k participants and direct WealthStep clients is that we provide savings advice tools, portfolio selection advice tools, actual portfolio management and monitoring of the portfolios once they're selected by clients, and then ongoing education and progress nudges through social media. An example of the ongoing education is a video such as this, and then there are other video segments that may be helpful as well. The investment committee internal to WealthStep and the advisory group goes through a formal process in the portfolio design that follows a traditional institutional process common amongst the multi-billion-dollar investors, and this same type of process and approach is applied to our clients directly. As a preview, the common structure of the investment options for this program are 4 portfolios along the risk-reward spectrum that are designed for different life stages. So this helps investors make choices much more easily in order to find an appropriate portfolio for each segment of life based on different risk-return requirements as one prepares for and enters and passes through retirement. If you are a 401k participant in a plan that has target date funds, this process is automatically handled for you. If you choose a target retirement date of a certain date, then the portfolios will be gradually changed on your behalf inside those target date funds automatically. Notice here that while some people may feel that investing is a risky proposition, later we'll talk about the different kinds of risks. But it's important to note that, for example, if you are too conservative or too low risk in terms of investment volatility, which is just one of multiple risks, that may not lead to sufficient growth and could harm your chances at successfully retiring or becoming financially independent. So we'll talk a little bit more about what stocks are and what bonds are, but get a sense here of the different age groups, and if you're not following this pattern, you may want to make sure you really have selected something that's appropriate for you. So how do you achieve goals? What are the key factors? Some of the key success factors are knowing your goal, simply defining what you're trying to achieve, and that can be done with some simple tools we'll talk to you about later, dramatically increases the chance of success. Having the right risk focus means knowing what the different risks are, which goes far beyond investment or market volatility, saving the right amount, and then investing with discipline. All of these are critical elements are not complicated, but can be challenging for the less experienced investor. But following a process can really help you get them done more effectively and more easily. And why is this so important? Well, everyone, or many people now, are really part of what we call the first 401k generation. That means that for most people, or increasingly great number of people, are required to make their own investment choices, whereas decades ago, retirement plans, if someone had a retirement plan at all, the decisions about investing were made by the company that sponsored that retirement plan. So now people are on their own but don't generally have a lot of investment training. That's why a meeting like this can be very helpful, and in many cases fundamental in terms of your potential success, because one of the key elements here in terms of being prepared to retire or achieving retirement readiness is having enough money so that you don't run out of money while you're in retirement. So a lot of this involves some challenging questions between balancing the present and the future, enjoying life now, while also being able to live comfortably in the future. Not easy, but is a great opportunity to achieve both the now and the later with just a little bit of planning and some disciplined saving and investing. Because what many people forget is that retirement is a lot like, for some people, a big vacation. If you go on a week or 2-week vacation, you plan for it, you think about it, you save up for it, and many people spend a lot more time planning and thinking about their yearly vacation than they do their retirement period, and that can lead to some unfortunate surprises when people arrive to retirement or the age at which they wish to retire and realize they didn't think or plan enough. So planning for that big vacation is really what this is all about. Even if you continue to work during retirement or part-time or on a nonprofit unpaid basis, it's really about having the financial independence to make that choice and be able to do what you want in maybe that third stage of life. So what are the statistics? This is not intended to scare you, but it's important to know whether or not you're in the group that is behind in terms of preparation or whether or not you're on track. More than half of people are not on track to be able to retire at 65. More than 70% of people are not prepared when they factor the healthcare costs, because healthcare costs are about $100,000 per person or $200,000 per couple during retirement. And that's a big number when you consider that most people that are in pre-retirement age of 55 to 65 have only saved about $164,000. So health costs will consume a lot of that, and some people think that Social Security will help, and it might help a little bit, but it generally won't cut it. And the big challenge here is that most people, or 40% rather, are not prepared and aren't even aware. So being aware is step number one. And I would like to pass on a message. When we are out meeting directly with 401k plan participants and other individuals, we have encountered cases where people say, oh, I wish someone had talked to us about this before. I would have saved more. I could have done more, and have asked us to pass on that message to others, because there's some people who have said that if they had a process like this 20, 30, 40 years ago, they would be in a much different place and would be able to retire with less stress rather than being forced to work indefinitely. So we hope that's helpful, and we hope that reduces your risk in the future of being able to retire. The other element here is a reminder in terms of health costs is to stay healthy. Exercise, eat well, sleep, and even studies show that laughing improves your health. So try to enjoy all those things and take good care of yourself, and it will improve your health as well as save money for other expenses or plans that you have in retirement. So what kinds of risks are there? There are quite a few. I mentioned that it's not just investing. The most common risk that people think about is the uncertainty of principal or market volatility, which is really auction risk, because the stock market, or the bond markets, but the stock market's more volatile, is really about auction risk. If there are more buyers than sellers, price goes up. If there are more sellers than buyers, the market goes down. And this is what causes daily, monthly, and yearly volatility in the stock markets. It's really a human effect, and sometimes it's when people panic. If more people panic than don't, markets will drop faster. So sometimes that's very helpful to understand that markets are not such a mysterious being, but rather are human beings who are sometimes making emotional mistakes. This brings us to the other question here. What are the other risks? Well, there's emotional investing. We'll talk about that. Loss of principal, which is fairly uncommon. It's sort of like losing your wallet. It's different than fluctuation of prices in the market. Inflation, longevity risk, or the risk of running out of money by living a long time, insufficient saving, and trying to catch up late. And catching up late is what some people do when they invested too conservatively and didn't save enough, and they're approaching retirement and they realize they don't have enough to retire, and some people start saving more and investing much more aggressively just before they plan to retire, and that can be dangerous because that can lead to surprises if there's a big market drop right before retirement, just as someone increased their stock exposure to try and grow their assets faster. Another important element, there are a lot of people currently who are under 35, who are young adults whose only real investment experience or awareness of the markets have been during the times of the dot-com crash and the global financial crisis. It is not normal to have two such bad markets in such a short time frame. Those are the second and third worst markets in history. The next, or the very worst of all, was the Great Depression, which was about 70 years prior. So it is not that common to have such bad markets, although it is normal to have volatility regularly throughout history. So these are elements. We'll cover some of this. So what is one of the biggest risks? It's undersaving. You can have a great investment program, but if you're not putting enough money into it, you simply can't grow your assets enough. So one of the things that causes undersaving is something called present bias, when people believe that their current situation is what they'll always be in. If they're surviving or have a little bit of savings, they believe that they will always have savings. But some people forget that if they stop working, there's no more income, and the income needs to be provided by your own investment portfolio, which makes it especially important to save and grow and build. There was a study done not too long ago that showed that the primary reason also that many people save is that they don't believe or understand that they will eventually need the money. So Stanford did this study and provided a computer simulated image of people about what they might look like about 40 or 50 years later. And younger people in particular started saving a lot more because they realized that there's a future self that needs them. And they made a connection, visualizing and in terms of how the brain works. When you visualize something about the future, you're more likely to take action on it. So there's an app for that. So go out and try that yourself, and you might get a kick out of it, and it might help you feel inspired to save more. If you don't save, there's a real cost to it. So it's really valuable to start early. For people who start, say, at age 25 and use the combination of portfolios that we mentioned earlier and save about $5,000 a year in total, and this would be saving less of your actual money if you're in a 401k that has a match. But if you just consider that total for the moment, people who that are, or once people reach age 65, the amount of savings that people would have if you start at 25 would be about $1 million, given these assumptions here. If you start at age 38, about $380,000. If you start at age 51, only about $120,000. And the key factor here is that people saved more but saved early, and that allows for the power of compounding to take effect, because the difference in actual savings for $1 million versus almost $400,000 was only about $60,000, 204, the difference between that and 138. So not a small difference, but the difference of what was actually grown on those amounts was about $600,000. And of course, if you don't do anything and then wait until you're 51 or so, or age 50 or so, it's even harder and harder to catch up. So try to do that now and think about things you can do just to save a few extra dollars per day can really dramatically change your futures. Because the future, believe it or not, will eventually happen, and people are living longer and longer. This is a challenge, a wonderful challenge for many people who are healthy in older age, but yet a relatively new challenge in the big scheme of things in terms of history. Just 70 or 80 years ago, life expectancy was about age 65. Now many people are living out into their late 80s and in some cases late 90s. So people that retired 30 years ago didn't have to save as much as people who are starting to retire now or who will be retiring farther out in the future. So living longer and health advances are wonderful, but they do require that we all save more in order to avoid running out of money. Another key risk is inflation. We call this the invisible enemy because people don't think about it as a risk, especially in environments like we are in currently where inflation is very low. But there are periods where inflation has been much, much higher. What you could buy with $1 in 1971, you could only buy 21 cents of goods in 2002. That's about an 80% loss, and that is far worse than the worst stock market drops. The Great Depression dropped about 76% over the course of several years. The global financial crisis market dropped about 55 to 60%, depending on which market you're looking at. And the difference is that those financial markets, those stock market crashes, were followed by strong recoveries and full recoveries over just a matter of a few years. However, inflation doesn't have a reward. It doesn't pay you back for being patient with time. So you want to fight inflation. The only way you can fight inflation is by holding assets that grow more rapidly than inflation, and that generally requires stock exposure. And sometimes bonds do, in the long run, do a little better than inflation, but having the right amount of stock exposure at each life stage is really valuable for that. And so we'll talk more about how that works later, but let's come back to how much you might actually need then. Because if you're thinking, what's my goal? I don't know how much to save. I don't know where to start. There's something called the 4% rule. That is a simplified way to guesstimate whether or not you are going to run out of money in retirement. So someone who wants to or has $1 million when they retire, and assuming they are in retirement for about 30 years and are holding a balanced portfolio of stocks and bonds, that person, if they spend $40,000 a year or $3,000 a month, it's highly unlikely that they will run out of money. So it estimates the amount that person can spend per month, and that's pre-tax. So after tax, that's a smaller number. If you have $200,000 when you start retirement, that's 4% would be 8% per year, and that's only about $700 per month pre-tax, which for most people is not going to be enough to live the way you want to live in your retirement years. So notice as well that this $200,000 is higher than what the average person has that is just about to retire. So very important to figure out exactly what you need, and you can use the Retirement Savings Worksheet program to help you determine more specific numbers and help you figure out exactly how much you might need to save right now with every paycheck in order to accomplish the nest egg number that is a good fit for you for your retirement plans. So make sure you save enough, and this can be a good, helpful rule of thumb. What are the different investment markets? If you're going to be an investor, you need to know what the broad categories are. One is stocks, the other is bonds, and the other is short-term, or sometimes considered as cash, although cash is currently is in banks and money market accounts is returning closer to 0%. The long-term average of short-term bonds and quasi-cash is closer to 4%. But long-term average of stocks is about 10%, bonds 6%, 4% for short-term bonds, and then inflation tends to rise on average at about 3%. So $1 grew to these numbers here, And if you just look at this numbers, it sounds really easy, like an easy choice. Let's just hold stocks. However, stocks are more volatile, and we'll talk about that as well. So that's why it's important to have the right investment portfolio for each life stage to make sure you don't have too much volatility when you're actually spending the money in retirement, for example, and to save up enough and have enough growth from more volatile asset classes while you don't need the money and can be patient with the market volatility to help grow it, and then work your way gradually down into more conservative structures, portfolios. So what is volatility? It's that auction risk we talked about, and what this image shows is year by year from 1984 through 2013, different investment markets. Each color represents a different investment market. So for example, the red box is the S&P 500 U.S. Stock Market Index. The green box is the Barclays Aggregate U.S. Bond Market Index. And there's emerging bonds and emerging market stocks and real estate and lots of different asset classes here. And what you can tell just by looking at this is that there are different winners in every year and others that are at the bottom every year, and it varies quite a bit. So some people who think it's easy to predict market movements and guess what's going to happen are often wrong, and those that try that often end up with worse results than people who simply pick a well-built portfolio and stick with it. So there are some years where returns are very strong, where, for example, emerging markets might have been up 40% in 2007, and the next year we're down 63%, and then back up 70% the following year. Markets are very volatile in some cases. The more volatile markets tend to be the stock markets, and the less volatile tend to be the bond markets. However, there are some exceptions to that over some time periods. But this gives you some sense of the importance of a diversified portfolio approach that helps you reduce and not have to think about all those moving parts. That's where WellStep and the advisory group take care of that for you once you've selected the right portfolio for your current life stage. And that volatility that we talked about really does happen. These are those four worst markets we talked about: the Great Depression in gray, the dot-com boom or bust and recovery in green, the 70s financial market and oil crisis in red, and the global financial crisis a few years ago in blue. So some difficult, the worst markets tend to be shaped like something like this black line we've drawn here, where markets drop rapidly, and again, a lot of that has to do with that auction effect and investors being panicking and getting worried that prices are going to drop. Some more people sell, and then prices drop farther. And then at some point, people say, wait a minute, all those companies that with low prices are worth a lot more than their current prices, so wait, maybe we should be buying, and then markets tend to recover. So if you're a disciplined investor and you started here and you didn't panic and get out, you ended up with a much stronger recovery. If you wait until markets drop and then you panic and get out, your return goes sideways and you miss some pretty dramatic recoveries. This is a very fundamental, important investment concept, is that it's difficult to be disciplined, but it's impossible to know when markets are going to go up and go down. So pick a portfolio that makes sense for your life stage and stick with it, even if it bumps around sometimes. And what really drives those people who are emotional investors, and it's normal to be an emotional investor or feel some stress or excitement about markets, is that there's a pattern of emotional feelings that people go through with different market cycles. So when markets are good, people feel excited, thrilled, euphoric. When markets start to cool off, people get worried and sometimes panic, and sometimes people get out of the market and miss the recovery. That is the key thing. So some people wait until markets are good until they get in, which means they miss the rise, and then panic when at the bottom, that means, and then miss the rise again. So this is another critical concept to make sure. This is what the most successful investors know, is that it's important to not expect markets to be smooth, and instead to know that it's normal that they'll be bumpy, and to stick with it and be disciplined. And if you have spare cash on the side and markets happen to be down, well, guess what? That's actually a great time to add even more money because you'll be buying the whole world at low prices or on sale. So be disciplined and be consistent about adding money regardless of what type of market you're in, and that will pay off in the long run. So there are patterns of what investors do. There's studies that show exactly what the cash flows are in and out of different mutual fund categories across the whole mutual fund industry. And this tells us something also, or it's one way to look at investor behavior patterns. So after when the dot-com crash started, a lot of people moved out of stocks and into bonds just in time before, into cash just in time before stock market started cooking again, and then people started moving the money out of cash and into stocks just before the global financial crisis happened again. So people started moving money out of stocks and into bonds or into cash and then out of cash and back. A lot of movements around, oftentimes following exactly the wrong pattern. Not that you can tell what the pattern is going to be, but people who move things around and felt the drop and missed the recovery end up having a big oops in terms of their account value in the long run. Another way to measure this is by looking at actual markets versus studies that show what actual investor returns are. So most of these tallest bars here are the average returns over 20 years. In most cases, these are stock markets. These medium-level bars are mostly bond markets. And the average investor over the last 20 years, these are annualized numbers, had a 2.5% return, while many markets were 2, 3, or 4 plus times that amount. That is just barely better than inflation. It's worse than the short-term T-bills, and it's a little bit better than gold. A lot of people think of gold as a wonderful asset class, but gold in the long run doesn't even beat inflation. It's really a fear asset, where some people go into it when they're fearful, like they do into cash, but in the long run, there's a very low performing asset class. So it's really valuable to keep a long-term strategic approach so that even if markets get bumpy, in the long run, you're still benefiting from those higher returns of the higher returning asset classes. There's another measurement of investor panic, and that was a study done just a couple of years ago during the global financial crisis. People who panicked and got out and stopped adding money ended up with 2% increases in their balances over this time period here from late 08 to mid-2011. People who stayed the course, kept their asset allocations, didn't reduce their stock exposure, and even added money, on average, had a 64% balance increase. So that $100,000 became $102,000, or almost no increase, versus a big increase up to $164,000 over that time frame. So being disciplined pays, and there's a big price to panic, which is that you either oftentimes lose money or may just not have much of an increase. So why is it that markets are scary? Well, it's really about physical fear versus financial fear and the history of the way the brain developed. A lot of people are scared of spiders and snakes because 1,000 years ago, when everyone was sleeping on the dirt, spiders and snakes were a serious and regular threat to survival. They're no longer significant threats to survival. Most people don't even know anyone who's been harmed by a spider or a snake. But that instinct and that response is still built in. So when many people see spiders or snakes, they still jump back out of fear, even if the risk is very low. However, there are many more car accidents and deaths each year from car accidents. But yet people don't jump back every time they see a car or scream and panic running down the road. Now, if you had a Ferrari like this and you saw the car payment, maybe you'd scream from that, but you wouldn't be really afraid of the car. So the key thing is here is that this is a lot like investing, because a car, if you learn to drive safely and take driving courses and study carefully and are a cautious driver, you can use it as a tool to get from point A to point B. That means you are essentially managing the risk by learning, by being a smart, knowledgeable driver, and then applying those skills carefully. Investing is very similar. There are risks, but managing them carefully gets you from point A to point B, whereas panicking really doesn't get you anywhere. Brain science also explains some of this phenomenon that when people have information overload, they tend to make worse decisions. So this is common when markets are very volatile, and when markets are dropping fast, people hear information from friends and news sources and the internet and tend to feel overwhelmed about what to do, and then oftentimes as a result, it actually causes people to hit the panic button. And there's science behind that. There's a part of the brain that controls the fight or flight index reflex that is more commonly used when people are in information overload or panic state, whereas rational, smart decisions are much more common when people stay calm and avoid that panic button. One of the best and most commonly stated tricks for reducing information overload is simply taking a walk around the block. It increases your blood flow, gives you a chance for you to calm down, and gives the chance for the electrical activity in the brain to cool down a little bit, and takes that electrical activity away from the fight or flight reflex part of the brain and into the rational part of the brain. So just taking a walk can be very helpful. So let's take a look again at the investment portfolios. Now that you've thought about saving and you understand what moves markets and the volatility, and you understand something about the emotional investing factor that causes many people to make mistakes, what do the actual portfolios look like? Without going into all the underlying details in this presentation, the basic idea is the more aggressive portfolios that have a higher expected return, in this case about 8%, also have higher volatility, also have a higher upper potential return range. So the return ranges here show what might happen in any given year given statistical likelihoods and statistical econometric forecasting, which says that in any given year you could have a return that might be as high as 45% or a little bit higher, or as low as negative 22% or a little bit lower. And in really challenging markets or really exciting markets, it can be higher or lower than that. But it gives you some sense about what a portfolio might look like. The moderate aggressive portfolio is 75% stocks, 25% bonds. That reduces, the bonds reduce the volatility, which brings down the downside risk potential in any given year, but it also reduces the upside opportunity and reduces the average expected return. Similarly for the moderate portfolio and the conservative portfolio. So notice that a 4.7% return here is significantly lower over time, especially when you consider the cumulative effect versus these other portfolios. And remember then that if you are not in this age group, it is probably going to harm your retirement readiness if you are too conservative too soon. So remember, the idea of taking on some of this market volatility increases your return potential at different life stages when you can tolerate and have time frames to handle that volatility so that you don't encounter those risks of longevity risk and inflation risk, et cetera, that we talked about before. Again, if you are in a 401k plan with a target date fund, these will be automatically changed for you inside the portfolios. But take a look at these age ranges here and double check what you're holding versus that, and being patient over time is critical and actually helps reduce your risk. There's also upside to downside. As I mentioned before, when the market drops, the whole world's on sale. So if you are adding money with every paycheck and markets are down, that's actually the best time to be adding money because you'll be buying everything at cheaper prices. Sometimes people will ask us, hey, well, the market's dropping. Should I stop putting money in? No, that's actually the best time. That doesn't mean you should stop when the market's going up. Just be consistent about it, and you'll benefit from that over the long run. So if a friend asks you, hey, markets are going down, I got to get out. I got to get out of the market. You should too. You should tell them, well, no, investors, the most sophisticated and successful investors don't do that, and WealthStep and the advisory group don't advise doing that. But you could tell your friend, if they insist on getting out, ask them to get out just before your paycheck goes in, because that will drive the market prices down and you'll get an even better deal. Of course, we wouldn't wish that upon anybody, but that's the way markets work. So you want to be in that profit group, not the panic group. So back to the broad concept of risk, that price volatility or market volatility or auction effect is something that we'd like to have you put in this bucket of risks that you take all the time, normal risks. There is a chance of a car accident or food poisoning or having a difficult day if you drive, eat, or work, but the quote-unquote no-risk option, if you say, I don't want to have any risk of a car accident, you never leave home, well, that's going to be a challenging life unless you live close enough to your work and your friends and supermarket to be able to do what you need to do. So we want you to really carefully consider adding this over time into your normal set of healthy, smart risks that you take if you're choosing the right portfolio for each life stage. Most people don't grow up investing at a very young age, but learn more gradually to be careful with cars, careful and comfortable with cars, food, and other factors. So it's normal that people aren't naturally as comfortable with the risks of investing, but it's important to get comfortable if you want to be successful in growing your assets appropriately over time. So this is really about keeping your eyes on the prize. You want to focus on using the right risks to get you where you want to go, and not focusing only on one risk in a way that might prevent you from getting where you want to go. So for example, if this gold line is the retirement number, or these stars here rather are your different retirement outcomes, acceptable retirement outcomes, would you rather have the path that leads to this gold dot, or would you rather have the path that leads to this black dot? Well, it sounds obvious here because one is in the success range and the other is not. However, if you look at what happens along the path, it can be a bumpy ride. And so you need to decide whether or not it's worth taking some bumps to increase your chance of success, or to reduce your investment volatility while dramatically increasing your retirement readiness risk. So you trade one risk for another, and so you need to be very careful and clear and methodical about which risks you take and which risks you want to overcome. So keep those eyes on the prize, and you'll notice here that this snake is the same shape as that market. So when you see bumpy markets, try to repeat to yourself, it's a car, not a snake. It's a car, not a snake. If you've got a portfolio that you have that is appropriate for life stage, it's a car, not a snake. As some of the Wealth Step tools include portfolio questionnaire and savings worksheet. These tools involve only a few questions and will help you figure out what the most appropriate portfolio might be, and will help you figure out how much is appropriate to save to get you to your goal. So make sure and take advantage of those tools. And if you are still doubting, it feels like a daunting task to save up for a big number that sounds so big and so far away, it's key in terms of success to really think, well, are you limiting yourself in terms of what you believe unnecessarily? Think of big obstacles that you've overcome in the past that you didn't think were possible, but that by effort and thought and focus, you were able to overcome them. Everyone has these, some more than others, but you can do it. And add retirement to that list of things that you will overcome if you do the right approach. So be aware of that belief that's limiting you, dismantle it, undo it, tear it apart, envision a new belief that will help you get there, and then start with just one step. And that's where Wealth Step and this advice process comes in. And to conclude, and in summary, the key ideas here are for you to take control, taking full control of the 4 keys to financial independence success. Step 1 is to, or key 1 is to do that basic planning to figure out what you need to do. Focus on the right risks rather than the wrong risks in terms of what will actually help you accomplish your goal. Save enough. For most people, that needs to be 15% a year when you're starting young. If you are starting later, sometimes that needs to be more, but use that savings worksheet to test that and figure that out. And if that savings worksheet produces a big number, well, just do what you can and then keep increasing it every time you can. You'll help yourself get there. And then in terms of investing using portfolios on a disciplined basis, not an emotional basis, and focusing on the long run, focus on the goal, keep the eyes on the prize. This is really about determining the difference between things that matter and don't, and things you can control, which is your choices. You can't control markets, but you can control your choices and how you respond to markets, and that space in between is what helps you get there. So focus on that space, focus on that impact that you can make, and that applies to investing in all other aspects of life, and you will be successful. So we look forward to you creating your own success story starting now, and we'd actually encourage you to send us a postcard once you, or an email, but postcards are great too. Once you have achieved that success, we want to hear your success stories, and then try sending yourself a postcard now from your future self, thanking you for all the work that you're going to do to help your future self be okay in retirement or in that third stage of life. And to help you along the way between these investment education and planning sessions, we would encourage you to go to our Facebook and Twitter pages and follow us, where we will send out reminders and nudges and insight and articles and short videos that will help you become a more sophisticated, successful, and an effective investor, and even enjoy the process. So thank you very much. We appreciate you attending today, and we wish you the best on your financial journey.